Today, we're reviewing none other than the HP OmniBook 7. In case you weren't aware this laptop exists, it's because HP's just done an outright horrible job at marketing it. It's like on their third page on their main site, they're like, what? There's an OmniBook 7? That was my reaction anyway. Nonetheless, the OmniBook 7 is kind of like their upper mid-range laptop, so it replaces the HP Pavilion Plus series technically, and so it's more powerful than the mainstream OmniBook 5, but not quite there with the premium and productivity laptops. With that said, this laptop does have a ton of configurations. Yes, I'm aware, so don't come killing me because your configuration doesn't match mine. The one I specifically have here is rocking Intel's Core Ultra 5 processor, specifically the 255H variant. We do also have 16GB of LPDDR5X memory. Furthermore, we do have Intel's integrated Arc 130T graphics, a nice large 1TB solid-state drive, Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth version 5.4 standards, and this is a 16-inch Full HD Plus display. Again, keep in mind everything from the processor to the display might have variations depending on where you are, what region you're buying this laptop from, but at a minimum there are going to be consistencies that you can use from this review to determine whether or not the HP OmniBook 7 is the right laptop for your needs, so let's get into it. Because you are buying an upper mid-range laptop, you get a slightly more presentable cardboard box here, but honestly, who cares? Inside the box is what actually counts, right? Because behind some more protective packaging, you do have, of course, the OmniBook 7. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. We also do get a 100-watt charging adapter. It is Type-C powered, which is nice to see, and of course, the wall-outlet charging cable piece, and then some basic documentation to get you started. The HP OmniBook 7 is ultimately an upper mid-range laptop, which means it does use a slightly higher tier of material, so it has a complete aluminum body from top to bottom versus the likes of the OmniBook 5, which has a partial aluminum body. Of course, that silver color here really complements the aluminum finish, and ultimately this feels like a pretty premium device. Now, it does have a very symmetrical and more conservative design form factor, which is expected for a productivity machine. It does, however, have a modest weight of 4.2 pounds, which is slightly above the average for a typical 16-inch laptop, but nothing too crazy either. I/O port diversity is almost perfect. So on one side, you have a USB-A super speed port, a HDMI 2.1 port, you've got a Thunderbolt 4 port, and then you have a standard Type-C port that also has power delivery and DisplayPort functionality. On the other side, you have one more USB-A super speed port, a headphone jack. Now, the only thing really missing here is the inclusion of an SD card reader, but other than that, we're pretty good. The bottom side of this laptop is pretty much a giant removable aluminum lid. You do have two speaker grills on the extreme corners, and then the rest of it is basically the air intake vent, though the actual air intake vent is mostly on the right side. The rest of it is just HP adding holes for no reason. When you unfold this laptop, you have a good amount of palm rest space thanks to that large 16-inch form factor. At the center, you do have a reasonably large trackpad, a good amount of surface real estate. I can't fully tell if this is a glass surface finish or not. It seems like they've kind of like got this thin coating of glass, but it's actually plastic beneath it. Nonetheless, you do have a little bit of flex because the corners are slightly loose, but a good amount of tactility, making this overall a pretty decent trackpad. The keyboard, on the other hand, is a fantastic experience. You have nice large keycaps. The font is easy to read, the colors match closely with the rest of the body, and of course it is completely backlit, which is also nice. You get a 10-key number pad as well. One of my favorite things is the typing experience. I honestly think HP's put a lot of effort in improving the typing quality of their laptops. You have a good amount of key travel, a decent amount of tactility with the right amount of softness, making this probably second only to the likes of Lenovo's Yoga series in my opinion. The display here is also slightly on the underwhelming side. So look, to be fair, this laptop does offer multiple configurations. You can get a higher tiered 2K plus display. This right here is the base display, but nonetheless, at this price point, there are certain things that should be standard. So things start off well enough with a 16-inch IPS panel and a full HD plus resolution, but then you're stuck with a 60Hz refresh rate, really HP at the upper mid-range level. Now, you also have a peak brightness of 300 nits. While not an outright awful number, this isn't a great number. The screen doesn't get particularly bright, and this can be an issue in very bright daylight settings. Now, you do have a matte finish, thankfully, to help kind of mitigate some of that. However, the real crime with this laptop is the 62% sRGB color rating. There is no excuse for this. This should have had 100% sRGB, and the result is that while it's fine for general viewing, if you are doing anything color sensitive like video editing, for example, it's not going to be a great experience. Now we come to the Achilles heel of this laptop. I don't know whether HP does this deliberately or they just don't pay attention, but the hinge mechanism of this laptop is awful. Firstly, they've used like Alibaba quality plastic hinges on either side. It is really bad, guys. On top of that, the hinge has a extreme amount of wobble. It seems flimsy and loose and seems very fragile. If you are a rugged user, I'm just going to be honest, there's a decent chance you will break the hinges on this laptop a few years down the road. So again, you really want to take that into serious consideration. If you're a rough user, you may want to avoid this laptop until they fix those hinges seriously. Now, with that said, on a better note, you do have a plastic encasing around the display, which doesn't really sound like a better note, but the good news is that you do have a relatively mid-sized chin, so nothing too dramatic. The bezels are narrow enough, providing for a nice immersive display, and then you do have a medium-sized forehead, at the center of which you actually have a very nice 5-megapixel webcam with a built-in IR scanner, so it's Windows Hello compatible. A quick recap of the technical specifications we have on board. So we do have Intel's Core Ultra 5 255H series processor, 16GB of LPDDR5X memory, and Intel's integrated Arc 130Ti GPU. Now, there are some other configurations available. I've listed them below as well for your reference. Performance is an area where this laptop truly shines. So general stuff like surfing the web or word processing is a very fluid and smooth experience. Power productivity, like programming and code compilation, again, you have enough memory, enough horsepower to have a great experience without any hiccups. You can even do some degree of 3D modeling on this laptop. The 130T graphics are more than capable of handling easy to medium complexity situations or scenes with some pretty fast render speeds. Even multi-layer 4K video editing on this laptop actually was a pretty decent experience. The biggest limitation was the 16GB of memory, but aside from that, there were only a handful of times where we had frame drops, and it wasn't until you started color grading would you notice any sort of noticeable performance drop. So a pretty fluid experience. And you can even do some good casual gaming on here. The 130T graphics are capable of running games like Counter-Strike Go 2 at high settings around the 60 FPS mark, which again is fantastic performance for an iGPU. Thermals is a home run for this laptop. So we found under peak loads, this laptop can hit an average surface temperature in the 1/3 area of approximately 37 degrees Celsius. But a more realistic sustained load yields around 34 degrees Celsius, making this one of the coolest laptops in this segment. Now, fan noise, equally as impressive. You'll find that even under a peak load, you hit the mid 40 decibel mark with the dual fans that we have here. Otherwise, the number is so quiet that you can't generally hear it. In terms of self-upgradability, look, it's pretty standard, so unfortunately your memory is going to be entirely on board, which means you cannot upgrade it. However, you do have two M.2 storage slots, which is nice to see, one of them obviously being preoccupied, and then you do have a modular Wi-Fi card as well. This thing is rocking a 70 watt-hour battery, which actually results in an impressive 10 hours of real-world runtime on a single charge with some general productivity use cases. Now, as far as audio quality is concerned, despite just having a relatively basic dual speaker setup, HP really did invest in some decent speakers here because you get good lows and decent highs and mids as well. Volume could be better, but here's a quick sound test for reference. Wait, let me get my head straight. I need a drink of water. It's been days I've had a headache. Don't wanna wake up one day, feel like I regret things. I want my story just to have a happy ending, and I don't got a plan B, a plan A is all I need. Took the ships from the sea and burnt them all, no retreat. So this particular configuration of the HP OmniBook 7 goes for approximately $1,000 US. Granted, it frequently goes on sale, so you may be lucky and get a much cheaper price instead. But keeping it at its MSRP value, it's a decent laptop. You get a high quality aluminum build all around, you've got a great keyboard, decent trackpad, and of course you also have some good audio and great battery life combined with some top tier performance with great thermals. So those are all the pros. However, there are just a lot of caveats with this laptop. For example, HP just doesn't give you a great display at the base level for a upper mid-range laptop, but the real crime here is the hinge mechanism. I can kind of let go of everything, but the fact is that if your hinge breaks, your laptop becomes useless. It's like, your neck, like, you're gone, you're done, you're done. Doesn't matter what else you have. So Sounds a little graphic, but the point I'm trying to get at is that make sure you consider the hinge mechanism when you're buying this laptop, as that is something that is ultimately a potential point of failure. But beyond that, this is a relatively well-balanced laptop. If you want to get good general productivity performance at a reasonable price, this is definitely a pretty legitimate option to consider. I will have product links in the video description below in case you want to learn more or purchase this laptop. And as always, if you guys enjoyed the content, please consider liking this video, hitting that sub button so we can continue to grow and provide more content for you awesome people. Catch you in the next one.